The Amazon guy didn't even use the dolly today. That's how you know it's a good day. He just sort of surrendered. He backed his van up my driveway, threw open the rear doors, and began constructing what I could only describe as cardboard Everest on my porch. There were long, slender boxes that hummed with the promise of aluminum extrusions, stout, heavy cubes containing servo motors, and a surprisingly light but enormous carton that I knew held the racing seat. It was the final shipment. My magnum opus, a full-motion racing simulator rig, was ready for assembly. My name is Leo, and I am a professional hermit. Well, technically I'm a senior animator for a video game studio, but since the great corporate exodus of a few years ago, my commute has been a grueling 12-step journey from my bedroom to my office. I love my house. It's a perfectly nice 2-story slice of suburban heaven in a planned community called Maple Creek Estates. A place so idyllic it feels like the set of a movie where everyone is secretly a pod person. The lawns are uniformly green, the mailboxes are all the same shade of inoffensive beige, and the loudest sound you usually hear is the gentle hiss of a sprinkler system. I contribute to this peace. I'm a quiet guy. I don't throw parties. My lawn is mowed on a religiously observed bi-weekly schedule. My only vice, if you can call it that, is that I am a connoisseur of the delivery economy. My groceries, my clothes, my computer parts, my hobbies, my very lifeblood. It all arrives in a cardboard box, sealed with a smile. And that was the problem. Or rather, that was her problem. Her name is Karen Abernathy, and she is the self-appointed warden of Maple Creek Estates. She lives in the identical house directly across the street, a beige fortress from which she presides over her domain. Her official title was something useless like head of the Architectural Review Committee. But her unofficial role was neighborhood scourge. From her perpetually gleaming bay window, nothing escaped her notice. A trash can left out an hour too long, a child's big wheel abandoned on a lawn, a flag flown that wasn't the American flag, or a tasteful, season-appropriate banner. All were catalogued, judged, and ruthlessly quashed. I'd seen her once use a tape measure on a neighbor's decorative fence because she suspected it was half an inch over the HOA's height limit. She was a black hole of joy. For 2 years, I had managed to stay off her radar. I was the perfect, invisible neighbor. But my new racing sim hobby had turned my porch into a temporary distribution center, and it had finally, irrevocably, caught her eye. After hauling the last of the boxes inside, a task that left me sweating and questioning my life choices, I went to retrieve the mail. Tucked neatly under my doormat was a small, cream-colored envelope. The paper was thick, expensive. My name wasn't on it. I opened it. The handwriting was a work of art, a swirling, perfect cursive that must have taken years to master. It was the kind of handwriting that could deliver a death sentence, and you'd still admire its form. "Dear neighbor," it began, "it has come to my attention that your front porch has begun to resemble a loading dock. While I'm sure you have your reasons, it's important to remember that our homes are a reflection of our community. The porch is a space for welcoming guests and tasteful wicker furniture, not for being a warehouse. Some of us in Maple Creek take great pride in maintaining the aesthetic and property values of our neighborhood. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter. Sincerely, a concerned neighbor." I read it twice. A concerned neighbor. Right. The only thing Karen was concerned with was the fact that someone, somewhere, might be enjoying their property in a way she hadn't personally approved. There was no rage, no anger in me yet, just a profound sense of weary amusement. This was the opening shot in a war I didn't even know I was supposed to be fighting. I looked across the street. The afternoon sun glinted off her window, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw the silhouette of a head quickly retract back into the shadows. I crumpled the note in my fist. I had a racing simulator to build. Her petty grievances could wait. I tossed the balled-up piece of expensive paper into the recycling bin, blissfully unaware that I had just thrown away a declaration of war. I was a fool, a happy, oblivious fool, dreaming of flawlessly executed hairpin turns on a virtual Spa-Francorchamps. I had no idea I was already redlining on the first lap of the Cairn Grand Prix. The next few days were a blur of joyous construction. My office, once a respectable workspace, transformed into a mechanic's garage. The air smelled of metal and plastic. Allen keys became a permanent extension of my fingers. I was in my element. The porch problem and the passive-aggressive note that spawned it faded from my mind. The packages were gone, replaced by a glorious silver and black machine of pure joy in the center of my room. Peace, I thought, had been restored. The universe, however, had other plans, and those plans wore orthopedic sandals and a visor. It happened on a Tuesday. A final, crucial piece of the puzzle arrived. A specialized, ultra-wide monitor. It wasn't heavy, just impossibly awkward. I was doing that crab walk shuffle from the porch to my front door, the box blocking my entire field of vision, when a voice cut through the suburban silence like a circular saw through drywall. Ahem. I stopped, peering around the edge of the box. There she was, Karen. She had crossed the street and was standing at the bottom of my walkway, hands planted firmly on her hips. Her posture screamed, "I'd like to speak to the manager of this entire neighborhood." "Can I help you?" I grunted, my arms starting to shake. "That is precisely what I am here to ask you," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I had hoped my note would be sufficient. Clearly, I overestimated your sense of community. I shuffled forward and finally managed to deposit the box inside my doorway. I turned back to face her, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead. "The note?" "Oh, the one from the concerned neighbor. Sorry, it must have gotten lost in the mountain of joy you see before you. All gone now, though. Porch is clean, community aesthetic restored. You can stand down the neighborhood watch." Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't a joke. This is a residential area, not the Port of Los Angeles. My guests, the Bramwells from number 42, if you must know, had to look at that. That mess when they drove by yesterday." I leaned against my doorframe, a genuine sense of bewilderment washing over me. "First of all, Karen, they're boxes. They're not a family of feral hogs setting up a meth lab. They're geometrically pleasing stacks of cardboard. Second, are the Bramwells navigating the street via periscope. My porch is a good 50 feet from the road. I'm genuinely impressed it offended them from that distance." "Do not take that tone with me," she snapped, taking a step onto my walkway. It felt like a territorial incursion. "I am on the board of the Homeowners Association. I am responsible for upholding the standards of this community." I couldn't help it. A smirk crept onto my face. "Of course you are. Did they give you a sash and a tiny crown?" The color drained from her face. It was magnificent. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Living in your little digital world, having everything delivered so you don't have to interact with actual human beings. Well, the real world has rules, and you will be hearing from the HOA. Officially." She spun around with a huff and marched back across the street, her orthopedic sandals slapping against the pavement with righteous indignation. I watched her go, the smirk fading. The threat wasn't idle. I knew her type. The HOA was her personal army, a weapon she wielded with surgical precision against anyone who dared to live in a shade of color not on the pre-approved beige spectrum. A week later, the official declaration arrived. It was a cream-colored envelope, just like the note, but this one bore the embossed logo of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. A single, sterile-looking maple leaf. It felt heavier than it should. My hands were clammy as I opened it. The language was cold, corporate, and utterly soul-crushing. Official notice of violation, the header read. Pursuant to a review of your property at 18 Summerfield Court on October 8, 2025, a violation of the Maple Creek Covenants, conditions, and restrictions has been identified. Violation. Article 7, Section B. All properties shall be kept in a clean, sightly, and wholesome condition, and no rubbish, garbage, or other waste shall be allowed to accumulate or any fire hazard to exist. No unsightly materials shall be accumulated or stored in the public view. Your accumulation of excessive delivery packages on the front porch is deemed a violation of this covenant. Action required. Cease the accumulation of packages in public view immediately. Penalty? A fine of $50 has been assessed to your account. Subsequent violations will result in escalating fines and potential further action from the board. $50. $50 for having my own property delivered to my own house. This was no longer amusing. This was extortion by a committee of busybodies. I immediately picked up my phone and called the one person who would appreciate the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the situation, my best friend Dave. "You are not going to believe this," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Let me guess." Dave's voice crackled through the speaker. "You finally finished the sim rig, tried to climb in, and discovered you're now too out of shape to fit in the racing seat." "Worse, I've been fined. By the neighborhood Gestapo." I explained the whole saga. The note, the confrontation, the official letter. On the other end of the line, I heard a sputtering noise, which I recognized as Dave trying to suppress a tidal wave of laughter and failing miserably. She actually did it," he howled. "The absolute madwoman, $50 for boxes! Leo, this is the most suburban thing I have ever heard. You've reached peak suburbia. There should be an achievement for this." "It's not funny, man. This is my house. I'm not running a junkyard. They were here for a day, maybe 2. "Oh, it's hilarious," Dave insisted. "You, the guy who can't even be bothered to argue with a cashier over being shortchanged a nickel, have found yourself in a blood feud with a super Karen. So what are you going to do? Are you going to pay it?" "Pay it? Hell no, it's the principle of the thing. This isn't about $50. It's about a fundamental right to receive Amazon packages." "I love this. This is your Bunker Hill, man. What's the plan?" "We can start small. A campaign of minor annoyances. Get a dozen plastic flamingos for your lawn. Paint your door a color that's not on the approved list. I know a guy who can get us a goat." "A goat?" "Yeah, they can't fine you for a pet, right? And it'll eat her prize-winning petunias. It's a win-win." "I'm not getting a goat, Dave." Fine, coward. But you have to do something. You can't let her win. You have a moral obligation to all the package-loving, home-shopping introverts out there. You have to fight back." He was right. This was bigger than me. This was for everyone who ever clicked add to cart. The fine, the condescension, the sheer audacity of it all, it had awoken something within me. A dormant, petty creature that was now stretching, yawning, and demanding satisfaction. Karen Abernathy wanted a war over aesthetics. I was about to show her what happened when you pushed a quiet, creative man with a high-speed internet connection and a complete disregard for convention just a little too far. The battle for 18 Summerfield Court had just begun. My first instinct, my rational, adult instinct, was to try and solve the problem like a normal human being. This, in hindsight, was my greatest mistake. Normalcy was a language Karen didn't speak. My first attempt was practical. I went online and ordered the largest, most robust package drop box money could buy. It was a handsome, dark gray steel monstrosity that could likely survive a direct meteor strike. I bolted it to the concrete of my porch, right next to the door, well within the rules. The next day, the FedEx driver dutifully placed a small package inside it. Victory, I thought. The next morning, an email from the HOA was waiting in my inbox. The subject line was simply, Regarding your new container. Apparently, my permanent storage container, as Karen had so generously described it in her complaint, was an unapproved architectural modification. According to Article 9, Section D, any addition to the exterior of the house, including but not limited to sheds, awnings, and large metal boxes of vengeance, required pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee, headed by, you guessed it, Karen Abernathy. My request was, of course, retroactively denied. Another $50 fine was assessed for the unapproved modification. I was now down a theoretical $100. My next attempt was even simpler. I left a polite, laminated note for all delivery drivers. Please leave packages by the garage side door. Thank you. The garage was less visible from the street. Surely this would be the end of it. For 2 days, it worked. The packages were tucked away, out of sight. Then came the third email. Subject: Violation side yard. Karen, in her infinite vigilance, had apparently gone on a reconnaissance mission. Her complaint stated that my packages, though hidden from the street, were now cluttering the side yard, a violation of a different, more obscure bylaw about maintaining clear access around the property's perimeter. This was a safety issue, she claimed. A firefighter might trip over a box of cat food on their way to save my life. Another $50 fine. I was hemorrhaging fake money to a fictional government. My frustration was reaching a boiling point. I was being boxed in, legally and literally. Dave's suggestion of a goat was starting to sound less like a joke and more like a viable strategy. But I knew I couldn't fight her on her terms. She thrived on rules and reports. Fighting her with brute force like flamingos or goats would only give her more ammunition. I had to beat her at her own game. I had to become the one thing I never wanted to be, a rules lawyer. I formally requested a copy of the complete Maple Creek Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions. 2 days later, a 3-inch binder thick enough to stop a bullet was dropped on my doorstep. It was 300 pages of the most mind-numbing, soul-destroying legalese ever put to paper. It detailed everything from the acceptable sheen of exterior paint, satin, never gloss, to the maximum allowable height of a decorative shrub, 48 inches. I spent an entire weekend with that binder, a pot of coffee, and a pack of multicolored highlighters. My eyes burned. My soul withered. But as I descended into the 9th circle of bureaucratic hell, I started to see the matrix. The rules were extensive, but they were also finite. They were written by people, and people leave loopholes. They had rules for structures, for storage, for landscaping. But there was a fascinating gray area. The covenant was obsessed with things that were static: a shed, a fence, a pile of unsightly materials. It had almost nothing to say about things that were in motion. The eureka moment didn't come in a flash of brilliance. It came at 2 a.m. on a Monday morning, fueled by caffeine and pure, unadulterated spite. I was mindlessly watching some How It's Made marathon on TV. The episode was about a bottling plant. I watched thousands of bottles zipping along a conveyor belt, being filled, capped, and labeled without ever stopping. They were in a constant state of transit. They weren't being stored on the line. They were just passing through. My exhausted brain made the connection. The packages weren't the problem. Their stasis was the problem. The HOA could fine me for a box accumulating on my porch. But could they fine me for a box that was actively, mechanically on its way to my door? What if the package never technically touched the porch at all? An insane, glorious, monumentally petty idea began to form. The sidewalk was public property. My front door was private property. The 50 feet of pristine HOA-approved lawn between them was the battlefield. I needed to build a bridge. A private, automated bridge for packages. I bolted upright, my heart pounding with the thrill of revelation. I ran to my office, kicked my computer on, and fired up the professional 3D modeling software I used for work. For the next 4 hours, I didn't design fantasy creatures or futuristic spaceships. I designed the most over-engineered, legally compliant, spite-fueled package delivery system the world had ever seen. The design was beautiful in its absurdity. It would start at the edge of my lawn, right by the sidewalk. A small, elegant receiving platform, about 2 feet square, with a weatherproof lid. When a delivery driver placed a package on it, a sensor would activate. From there, a covered conveyor belt, about 18 inches wide, would transport the package up the gentle slope of my lawn. It would be quiet, electric, and shielded from the elements and prying eyes by a sleek, dark gray aluminum canopy. The canopy would be just low enough to not be classified as a fence or structure. The whole thing would terminate at a new slot I'd cut into the wall next to my front door, depositing the package safely inside my foyer. The packages would never be stored. They would not accumulate. They would be in a constant, legally defensible state of transit. It was malicious compliance elevated to an art form. It was perfect. At dawn, bleary-eyed but triumphant, I called Dave on video chat. "You look like you just wrestled a bear," he said, yawning. "I have wrestled something far more powerful, my friend. Bureaucracy. And I have won," I said, my voice hoarse. I shared my screen. The 3D model of the conveyor belt rotated slowly, glinting in the virtual sunlight of the software. Dave was silent. He just stared, his mouth slightly agape. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the hum of my computer. Then, a low chuckle started. It grew into a full-bellied laugh. He threw his head back and howled, tears streaming from his eyes. "Oh my God, Leo," he finally gasped, wiping his eyes. "You've done it. You've weaponized your engineering degree. It's beautiful." "It's compliant," I said proudly. "There is not a single rule in that 300-page book of sorrow that this thing violates. It's not a structure, it's a landscaping feature. The electricals will be buried, same as for garden lights. It's perfect." Dave was clapping slowly. "You are no longer just Leo, my friend. You are a weapon of mass construction. You are a suburban insurgent. This is the single greatest response to a petty grievance in human history. You have to build it. You have a moral obligation to build it." "Oh, I'm building it," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "I'm building it." "Just one suggestion," Dave added, leaning closer to his camera. "You have to put racing stripes on it." "I was thinking underglow LED lighting, synced to my doorbell," I replied. "Why not both?" Dave whispered, his eyes wide with vicarious glee. And in that moment, I knew he was right. This wasn't just about solving a problem anymore. This was about creating a masterpiece. The chasm between a brilliant 3D model and a functioning, infuriating machine is a deep one, and it is filled with contractors. Finding someone to build my monument to spite proved to be a challenge in itself. My first few calls were to the kind of slick, professional landscaping and construction firms whose vans you see parked in the driveways of the fanciest houses in town. Their names were things like Prestige Outdoor Solutions and Artisan Home Exteriors. The conversation with a man named Todd from Prestige was typical. "So, you want to install a walkway?" Todd asked, his voice smooth and professional. "Not exactly a walkway," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's more of a custom package conveyance system." There was a pause. "A what now?" "A conveyor belt. From the sidewalk to my front door, for boxes." Another pause. This one longer. I could hear him breathing. "Sir, is this a prank call?" Artisan Home Exteriors was even better. After I explained my vision, the woman on the phone politely told me, "I'm sorry, sir, but we specialize in patios and retaining walls, not factory equipment." She said factory equipment, with the same tone one might use for toxic waste or live wolverines. I was getting nowhere. My dream was dying a death by 1,000 polite but firm rejections. I needed someone who operated outside the box, someone who saw a challenge, not a liability. After scrolling to the third page of search results, the land of hand-drawn logos and missing websites, I found them. Sal and Sons Contracting. No job too weird. It was a promising start. I called. A gruff, gravelly voice answered. "Sal's?" "Hi, I'm looking to get a quote for a small project," I began. "What is it? Patio, driveway, fence?" "It's a little more unique," I said, taking a deep breath. "I want to build a conveyor belt on my front lawn." The silence on the other end was different this time. It wasn't confusion. It felt more like contemplation. "My boy Mikey's the one for the weird stuff," Sal grunted finally. "We can be there this afternoon, 4 o'clock. He hung up. At precisely 4, an old but immaculately clean Ford F-150 pulled up. Out stepped Sal, a man who looked like he'd been carved from a block of granite and seasoned with sawdust. Following him was Mikey, who couldn't have been more than 22. He had bright, intelligent eyes and was practically vibrating with energy. I led them to my kitchen table and opened my laptop, pulling up the 3D model. "Okay," I said. "Hear me out." I gave them the whole story. The packages, the notes, Karen, the HOA, the fines. I showed them the schematics, the planned route, the whole 9 yards. Sal listened intently, his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask. He occasionally glanced out the window towards Karen's house, as if sizing up the enemy. Mikey, on the other hand, was leaning so far forward he was nearly falling out of his chair. His eyes were wide with wonder. When I finished, Sal leaned back, stroking his chin. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You want me to dig up your perfect lawn, pour concrete, and build a mini freeway for Amazon boxes because your neighbor is a busybody?" "Essentially, yes," I confirmed, "but a very well-engineered, aesthetically pleasing mini freeway that fully complies with all municipal building codes." Before Sal could respond, Mikey burst out, "Dad, this is amazing! Look at the design! We could use a Raspberry Pi to control the motor and sync it with a delivery app. We could put a camera inside the tunnel with night vision. We could even add a scale at the receiving end to log the weight of each package. The possibilities are endless!" Sal looked at his son, then at me, then back at his son. A slow grin spread across his face, cracking his stony exterior. "My wife tells me I should take on more projects that spark joy," he said. "And the thought of that lady's face when she sees this thing." He chuckled. "It sparks a whole lot of joy. All right, Leo, let's build your crazy box machine." The next week, Sal and Sons Contracting descended upon 18 Summerfield Court. The work itself was a spectacle. The arrival of a mini excavator to dig the shallow trench for the wiring sent ripples through the neighborhood. Karen was practically fused to her window, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. The project became the local gossip. Neighbors I'd never spoken to would find reasons to walk their dogs past my house 3 or 4 times a day, slowing down to get a better look at the strange concrete footings and the aluminum frame taking shape. A man named Bob from down the street, who was perpetually washing his car, finally worked up the nerve to ask. "Hey there," he said, ambling over. "What's all this, then? Putt-putt course?" "Mobility assistance device," I said with a perfectly straight face. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," he said, his face clouding with concern. "Who's it for?" "My packages," I said. "They have a hard time with the stairs." Bob stared at me for a long moment. then just shook his head and walked away, clearly unsure if I was a madman or a genius. The inevitable finally happened on the third day of construction. I was outside with Sal, admiring the newly installed main conveyor belt, when a familiar black and white police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a weary face that suggested he'd seen everything suburbia had to offer. The other was young, a rookie, with a look of eager curiosity. Karen was standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching with an air of smug triumph. This was her trump card. She'd finally brought in the big guns. The older officer, whose name tag read Miller, approached me. "Good afternoon, sir. We've received a complaint about, He glanced at his notepad. Unauthorized commercial construction at this address." "Good afternoon, officer," I said, calm as could be. This was the moment I had prepared for. "This isn't commercial construction. It's a personal project, a custom package conveyance system." Officer Miller blinked slowly. The rookie, Chen, was visibly trying to suppress a grin, his eyes wide as he took in the half-finished contraption on my lawn. "A package conveyance system," Miller repeated, his tone flat. "That's right," I said, "and it's fully permitted." I walked over to a folder I had waiting by the door and produced the permit Sal had insisted on pulling from the city. It wasn't for a conveyor belt, of course. No such category existed. It was a permit for installation of low-voltage landscape lighting and a custom walkway feature. Every part of that was technically true. Miller took the permit and examined it. He walked the length of the construction, looked at the plans Sal had laid out, and then looked over at Karen, who was now tapping her foot impatiently. He let out a long, slow sigh. It was the sigh of a man who was 2 years from retirement and had seen far too much nonsense. "Well, mister," he checked the permit. "Leo, everything appears to be in order here." He handed the permit back to me. "The city signed off on it. As far as we're concerned, there's no law being broken." He turned to his young partner. "Come on, Chen." They walked back to their cruiser. Before getting in, Officer Miller turned to Karen, who was sputtering across the street. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying across the lawn. "This appears to be a civil matter, something for you and your HOA. It's not a police issue. Please have a good day." He got in the car, and they drove away. Officer Chen was laughing as they pulled away from the curb. I saw it clear as day. I looked at Sal. He was beaming. I looked at Mikey, who gave me a thumbs up. Then I looked at Karen. The smugness had vanished, replaced by a shade of red I had previously only seen on stop signs. Her trump card had been declined. Her ultimate weapon had been disarmed by a single piece of paper from the city planning office. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No sound came out. Then, with a strangled gasp, she turned and fled back into her house, slamming the door behind her. It was a massive, glorious victory. We hadn't even finished the thing, and it was already working perfectly. The war wasn't over, but the decisive battle had just been won, and I hadn't raised my voice, broken a single rule, or even gotten a parking ticket. I had won with paperwork. It was the sweetest victory of all. The next 2 days were a blur of finishing touches. Sal and Mikey weren't just contractors anymore. They were artisans, co-conspirators in my grand, absurd project. They worked with a newfound zeal, their professional pride now deeply invested in the outcome. Mikey, true to his word, had integrated a slick control system. The whole thing could be operated from an app on my phone. He'd installed a weatherproof camera inside the tunnel, giving me a first-person view of each package's journey. And the LEDs. Oh, the LEDs. At Dave's insistence, we had installed a strip of RGB lighting along the entire interior length of the canopy. Mikey had programmed it to flash green upon a package's arrival and pulse with a soft white light as it traveled. It was ridiculously, gloriously extra. The finished product was something to behold. It wasn't an eyesore, it was a piece of bizarre, futuristic sculpture. The dark gray aluminum canopy gleamed in the sun, its lines clean and modern. It didn't look like something you'd find in a factory. It looked like something designed by Apple, if Apple suddenly decided to get into the petty revenge business. For the grand unveiling, I assembled my team, Sal, Mikey, and Dave, who had driven over an hour, refusing to miss this historic moment for what he called a front-row seat to the downfall of a tyrant. We stood on my porch, 4 grown men giddy with anticipation, like kids on Christmas morning. The final piece of the plan was in motion. I had placed a specific order that morning for same-day delivery, a single 1-pound bag of artisan roasted coffee beans. Small, simple, but deeply symbolic. I was about to enjoy the first cup of coffee delivered by a machine born of pure spite. At 2:15 p.m., the familiar blue and gray Amazon van pulled up. A young driver I'd never seen before hopped out, a small, padded envelope in his hand. He walked up the path, glanced at the house number, and then saw it. The receiving platform at the edge of my lawn. On its lid was a small, professionally printed sign. Deliveries. Please place package here and close lid. The driver stopped. He looked at the box. He looked at my front door, a mere 50 feet away. He looked back at the box. A universe of confusion played across his face. He nudged it with his foot, as if to see if it was real. Then, with a shrug that communicated a deep and abiding resignation to the weirdness of his job, he lifted the lid, placed the envelope inside, and closed it. He gave the contraption one last bewildered look, shook his head, and walked back to his van. The moment he was gone, I pulled out my phone. My heart was pounding. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice grave, "initiate Operation Morning Brew." I pressed the Activate button on the app. A soft chime echoed from the receiving platform. The LED lights on its side turned from red to a vibrant green. From within the machine, a gentle whirring sound started, almost silent. We watched, holding our breath. The canopy's interior lights began to pulse. On my phone screen, the camera feed flickered to life, showing the padded envelope beginning its majestic journey. It moved with a smooth, steady grace, gliding up the slight incline. It was mesmerizing. The culmination of weeks of planning, frustration, and construction was happening right before our eyes. The envelope disappeared into the tunnel, the pulsing white light tracking its progress like a shooting star. 30 seconds later, a small slot next to my front door, which had looked like a mail slot, clicked open. The envelope slid out, dropping gently into a padded receiving bin inside my foyer. The whirring stopped. The lights faded. Silence. For a moment, the 4 of us just stood there, stunned. It had actually worked. It had worked perfectly. Then Dave broke the silence. "Holy crap," he whispered in awe. And then we erupted, we cheered, we high-fived, we hollered like our team had just won the Super Bowl on a last-second Hail Mary. Sal clapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell over. Mikey was pumping his fists in the air. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. Our celebration was so loud that it achieved the impossible. It drew the beast from its lair. Karen's front door flew open. She stormed out onto her porch, her face a thundercloud of rage. She had clearly been watching, waiting, and what she had just witnessed had broken her brain. "What is that thing?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What have you done?" "It's a package conveyance system, Karen," I called back, unable to wipe the grin off my face. "Problem solved! No more unsightly packages on the porch!" You can't do that," she sputtered, marching down her walkway and onto the street. That is an abomination. It's an eyesore. You've ruined this neighborhood." "On the contrary," Dave chimed in, stepping forward like my own personal hype man. "He has improved it. This is innovation. This is progress." By now, the commotion had attracted an audience. Bob from down the street put down his car washing sponge. The Bramwells at number 42 came out onto their lawn. A few other neighbors peeked out their doors. We had a crowd. This was Karen's moment to retreat, to realize she had lost. But she doubled down. Consumed by rage, she marched right onto my lawn, heading for the conveyor belt as if she intended to dismantle it with her bare hands. "I will have this thing torn down!" she screamed, her finger jabbing towards it. "This is a clear violation. It's industrial." "It's actually not, Karen," I said, my voice calm and surprisingly loud in the sudden quiet. I decided to address the whole neighborhood. "For those of you wondering what this is, let me explain." And so I did. I told them everything. I told them about the polite, anonymous note. I told them about her ambushing me on my porch. I told them about the 3 separate $50 fines from the HOA for the crime of receiving mail order goods. I explained how I had tried reasonable solutions, a drop box, leaving them by the garage, and how she had shot down every single one with another bylaw. "So I read the rule book," I concluded, my voice resonating across the manicured lawns. "I read all 300 pages of it, and I designed and built a solution that follows every single rule in that book. This machine is the result of me following the rules. I'm just a guy who wants to get his packages without being harassed and fined. This is me, solving the problem." A ripple of murmuring went through the small crowd. They looked from my beautiful, absurd machine to Karen's contorted, furious face. They looked at me, the picture of calm, reasonable compliance. And they started to understand. Bob from down the street let out a short, sharp laugh. Someone else chuckled. The laughter was what broke her. It was the one thing her power couldn't withstand: public ridicule. She realized she wasn't the righteous warden anymore. She was the butt of the joke. The neighborhood wasn't on her side. They were on the side of the guy who had responded to petty tyranny with brilliant, hilarious innovation. Her face went from red to a ghostly white. She looked around at her neighbors, her subjects, and saw not support, but amusement in their eyes. Her power, built on a foundation of intimidation and nitpicking, crumbled in an instant. Without another word, she spun on her heel. It wasn't the triumphant march of before. It was a full-blown retreat. She scurried back across the street, up her walkway, and disappeared into her house, slamming the door so hard I thought the windows might shatter. The war was over, and the victory was sweeter than any artisan coffee I could ever hope to drink. In the weeks that followed, the conveyor belt, which Dave had christened the Karenator 5000, transitioned from a neighborhood spectacle into a beloved local landmark. Its fame spread in strange and wonderful ways. Teenagers started taking selfies with it in the background, treating it like some piece of cryptic modern art. I once saw a group of them posing in front of the receiving platform, striking dramatic poses as if it were a portal to another dimension. I didn't have the heart to tell them it was a portal to my foyer. The delivery drivers, initially bewildered, came to adore it. It became a point of pride. They'd compete to see who got the conveyor belt route. My regular UPS driver, a friendly guy named Mark, told me it was the highlight of his day. He started leaving little notes on the packages, like, "Enjoy the ride," or "See you on the other side." The Karenator wasn't just a machine, it was an interactive experience. The neighbors, now fully on my side, treated me with a new kind of respect. It was a mixture of awe and amusement. Bob, the car washer, would give me a knowing nod whenever he saw me. The Bramwells from number 42, the very guests whose delicate sensibilities Karen had claimed were so offended, sent their teenage son over one day with a plate of cookies and a question. "My mom wanted me to give you these," the kid said, avoiding eye contact. "And also, she wanted to know if you could, build one for her. For groceries. She hates carrying them up the stairs." I politely declined, explaining it was a one-of-a-kind art installation, but the request was validation enough. I had become the neighborhood's resident eccentric genius, the mad inventor in the beige house. And Karen? The silence from across the street was absolute. It was more profound than any screaming match could ever be. The constant, judgmental presence in the window was gone. The obsessive gardening ceased. Her lawn, once a putting green of perfection, started to look merely normal. A few dandelions even had the audacity to pop up. It was beautiful. Her power had been predicated on the illusion of universal support, the idea that she spoke for the concerned neighbors of Maple Creek. When I calmly and publicly laid out the facts, I hadn't just defeated her. I had exposed her. I'd shown everyone that the emperor of the HOA had no clothes, just a rule book and a whole lot of free time. Her weapon was public opinion, and now it was firmly aimed against her. The ultimate punishment for a woman who lived for the drama of neighborhood governance was to be rendered completely and utterly irrelevant. 2 months after the unveiling of the Carinator, the final, perfect nail was hammered into the coffin of our little war. A "for sale" sign was staked into her perfect lawn. It was a handsome sign, of course, fully compliant with HOA regulations regarding size, font, and placement. I'm sure she'd checked. The day the moving van came, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying a cup of coffee. I watched as 2 men loaded her tasteful wicker furniture into the back of a truck. She emerged from the house one last time, got into her car, and drove away without a single glance in my direction. She just vanished. Maple Creek Estates was free. The story ends here, really. But it also doesn't. The Carinator 5000 is still humming along beautifully. The house across the street was bought by a young family with 2 kids and a golden retriever. Their lawn is a mess of toys and happy chaos, and it's wonderful. I'm on the phone with Dave, leaning back in my chair, watching the world go by. It's a peaceful afternoon. The gentle hiss of sprinklers is the only sound. "So, you happy?" Dave's voice crackles over the speaker. "You won the dumbest, most expensive war in suburban history. You literally drove a woman out of your town with a box mover." I look at the sleek, gray line of my creation, a permanent fixture on my landscape. It's a trophy, a monument. In the distance, I see the familiar shape of a FedEx truck turning onto our street. It pulls up. The driver hops out with a long, rectangular box, gives my house a thumbs up, and places the package on the receiving platform. My phone buzzes in my hand. A notification. Package received. Initiating transit. The soft green light flashes. The gentle whirring begins. Inside the tunnel, the LEDs pulse to life, tracking the package's steady, graceful journey towards me. It's probably the new graphics card I ordered. Or maybe it's just a restock of paper towels. It doesn't really matter. The system works. I take a slow sip of my coffee, the afternoon sun warming my face. I watch the package as it continues its silent, majestic trip up my lawn, a testament to the glorious things a man can achieve when pushed to the very brink of his patience. "Dave," I say into the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a war. It was creative problem-solving. I pause, watching as the package slides gently into its slot by the door with a satisfying little thump. And let me tell you, the solution is humming along beautifully.